Don't listen in the dark. Thrills can kill. You might think it's fun to give yourself the creeps. April certainly did. She would intentionally wait until the street grew dark and quiet to run any of her errands for the day. The simple walk to the corner market would make her heart beat just a little faster. As she walked the mile, she could feel the blood pumping. She would feel alive as her pace slowly sped up. But always the walk back would get to her more. You see, on the way back, she would take the other side of the street. On the other side of her suburban street was an oddity, to say the least. Sitting on the lawn of an otherwise average-looking house was a twisted mass of steel resembling a 1979 Volkswagen Beetle. The car's front end had been smashed nearly flat, and the passenger door had been cut clean by the firefighters trying to get the victim out of the wreckage. This mangled mess had belonged to a young woman, Tina Williams. Tina tried to drive herself home after a night of partying. Needless to say, she never made it. Tina went off the shoulder and into a parked car just 5 blocks from her home. She was dead on the scene. Tina's parents went through a long and painful time of grief, during which they made the macabre decision to have the wrecked remains of Tina's car placed on their lawn. They considered it a kind of memorial, a warning to all the kids of the neighborhood who got their licenses and thought they were invincible. To say it was eerie was an understatement. The neighborhood wasn't happy with the Williams family's decoration decisions, but it was simply too sore of a topic to breach. Over the years, everyone had decided to just let it be. But April was a different story. As April would skip her way home at night, she would intentionally come back on the opposite street, guaranteeing her a thrilling glimpse of the ghastly scene. And it would never disappoint. She would almost always succumb to a gut feeling of fear that made her feet want to run. Her nasal passages would clear, and her fight-or-flight instincts would start to hit full tilt. She would sprint the rest of the way home, and as soon as she had latched her door behind her, she would giggle with delight. She loved to be scared. She would go through this excitement maybe once a week if she was lucky, until, of course, summer vacation hit. Once school was out, April would be running down the streets late at night ad nauseum, trying to get her favorite thrill. Only one problem ever really presented itself. The thrill was starting to subside. The more she would go on her runs, the more mundane they had started to feel. Eventually, she didn't even look for excuses. She would simply leave the house and stare at the wreckage at the Williams house. Even the wreckage started to become ordinary. April had memorized how the front end went inward, what windows still had glass in them, where the jaws of life had cut through to try to retrieve the body of poor Tina Williams. That would make the chill run up her spine. The thought of that poor girl. That poor dead girl. April had never known Tina. She hadn't moved to the area until years ago. But the idea of the death was upsetting to her. And she was drawn to it. April's older sister had moved away for college 3 years ago, and the hallway closet was still filled with many of her things. She was a girl of strange tastes. There were mostly movies, books, and board games stacked in boxes. When things got boring to April, she would search through the closet. That's when she found it. The answer to her boredom. Just seeing it gave her heart a sudden increase in speed. She opened the box and looked down at the board and the planchette. It was a Ouija board. The plan was to place the Ouija board on what was left of the hood of the car and try to contact Tina's spirit. The plan seemed silly, but in the end, all it had to do was scare her. That was simply all she wanted. The anticipation for her plans were exquisite. She tapped her feet all day long, waiting for the sun to set, for the time to come. When night finally arrived, she waited for the lights in the houses to slowly shut off in the neighborhood. By 11:30, all the lights were out. April was the only night owl on this block. April opened her front door. There was a chill she hadn't anticipated. She went back inside and put on a loose-fitting windbreaker she had also found in her sister's belongings. She grabbed the board and made her familiar walk to the dreadful sight. As she arrived at the wreckage, her body and mind started to panic. She wanted to run away. It was perfect. She basked in that feeling of terror. She smiled, ever so slightly. She found that the best spot to place the board would be on the dash of the car. It was wide and still somewhat flat following the accident. April would have to lean inside through the car window to use the board. It was too perfect. She set the board inside the car and leaned in. She put her hands on the planchette and started to move it in a figure eight. "Are you a spirit?" she asked timidly, trying not to speak too loud. The planchette slowly moved to yes. That feeling pounded through April's entire circulatory system. Even if she was just doing it to herself, this was an incredible and thrilling experience. "Can you help me talk to Tina Williams?" she asked, slightly less timid as the planchette continued moving on the board, never stopping between questions. The arrow moved down to no. This answer perplexed April. "Why not?" she asked. The arrow started to move again. It started to spell. I-am-T-I-N-A. I am Tina. That answer made April feel more alive than she had ever felt in her entire life. Her legs were tingly as her chest felt light, like it could float away. She took a deep breath to ask another question. "What is it like to be dead?" Her planchette started to move faster now. It began spelling yet again. L-O-N-E-L-Y. "Lonely," she said to herself. "Why is it lonely?" she asked the board. The pointer started to move faster now. It started to show the same letters over and over. J-O-I-N-M-E, J-O-I-N-M-E, J-O-I-N-M-E. Join me. A feeling went through April's body she had never felt before. It was too much. She was done. It had gone too far. Her chest was starting to throb as she felt the fear overtook her senses entirely. The board dropped suddenly, startling her further. She pulled herself out of the car window when she felt a hand grab her coat sleeve. She struggled, but it would not let her go. Tina's ghost was lonely. She had been dead so long. She wanted April to join her in the grave. She struggled as much as she could, trying to pull free, but all she could hear in her head was, "Join me, join me, join me." As her heart pounded, April began to feel lightheaded. She went limp and fell against the car door. In the morning, Mr. Williams came out to find a horrible sight. A young girl leaning against the wrecked Volkswagen Beetle. She was dead from a sudden heart attack. Her coat had been caught on the jagged metal of the car door.